In a quiet Long Island neighborhood stands a house that has terrified America for decades. It's a place where a brutal mass murder shocked the nation and where, just a year later, a new family claimed they were driven out by something evil. This is the story of the Amityville horror and the mystery that still divides believers and skeptics. It was the early morning of November 13, 1974, when 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo left his bedroom window open despite the cold November air. Hours later, as dawn broke, his father, Ronald Sr., would close the window. He had no idea it would be the last thing he ever did. Less than 12 hours later, Ronald Jr., who had been working as a building attendant, returned home. His mother, father, two brothers, and two sisters were asleep inside. But when Ronald knocked on the door, there was no answer. Thinking nothing of it, he let himself in through an unlocked window. That's when he saw them lying in their beds, each shot once in the head. With the exception of Ronald Jr., who was spared, the entire DeFeo family was dead. Now, this could have been the end of the story. Maybe it was just another mafia hit or mob-related crime, the kind of thing that happens in those kinds of families. But the shocking revelation was yet to come. You see, after making a quick phone call to the police, Ronald DeFeo Jr. proceeded to tell them that he had not only committed the murders, but he had also acted alone. To make matters worse, it wasn't even that hard to prove that he had done it. All the murder weapons were recovered from the scene along with plenty of evidence that could prove that the sole gunman was none other than Ronald Jr. Apparently, he had confessed to the crimes himself. Later on, when he pleaded guilty to all 6 counts of second-degree murder, he was sentenced to 6 consecutive jail terms of 25 years each, one for every member of his family that he murdered. So, it seemed like this was an open and shut case, right? Well, actually, it gets more curious as time goes on, because if we look at the facts of the case, there are so many unanswered questions. For example, why did Ronald commit these heinous crimes? According to what Ronald told the police, his crime spree started simply enough. After returning home from work around midnight, he noticed that his father was awake watching TV. Now, despite being only 23 years old, Ronald Jr. already had a strained relationship with his father. So, when he confronted his son about what time it was, Ronald Jr. lashed out. And before he knew what was happening, he pulled out a rifle and killed his father. From there, he went from room to room killing each family member until he had taken the lives of everyone he loved. There's just one problem with this supposed confession. As time went on, Ronald's story changed a number of times. Sometimes he would claim that his father had actually initiated the confrontation between them. Other times he said that voices in his head instructed him to kill his entire family. So, which one of these is true, or maybe neither? A year after the murders, another family moved into the home. George and Kathy Lutz were eager to get their hands on a good deal. When they found out that the house was for rent, they jumped on the opportunity without hesitation. However, George and Kathy didn't know that the previous owner had tried to warn them that the place was haunted. Perhaps because of this, the Lutz family only agreed to sign a month-to-month lease, which allowed them to leave anytime. At first glance, there was nothing in the house that warned of any malevolence or sinister forces. But only days after moving in, things began to get strange. George and Kathy, along with their 3 children, soon began experiencing weird things throughout the house, things that they couldn't explain. One day, while painting a wall, George felt something wet and slimy trickle down his arm. When he looked back, he found that the source of the substance appeared to be coming from the wall itself. Then, as he watched in disbelief, he saw green slime ooze out of the painted surface and slowly flow onto the floor. Of course, there's only one way this story ends if it's true. The green slime that oozed from the walls wasn't paint or plaster. Instead, it was something sinister, something connected to the evil that haunted the house. But this was far from the only time George and his family came face to face with the supernatural. One evening, they decided to watch TV in the living room when they suddenly heard heavy footsteps in the hallway right above them. Being on the second floor, they knew that it couldn't have been their young kids. Then, just as suddenly, the footsteps stopped. On another occasion, Kathy and her friend were preparing dinner in the kitchen when they heard chains dragging metal moans. As they froze in fear, they heard the sound of dragging chains growing louder and louder. Just as they were about to run for cover, the noise seemed to stop right outside the kitchen door. The pair stood frozen in fear, listening intently, wondering what was going to happen next. But thankfully, whatever it was, didn't seem to want to come inside the kitchen. And when they cautiously opened the door, they found nothing in the hallway. Then there was the mysterious odor that seemed to permeate the entire house. Some nights the smell was so bad that Kathy had to throw up. Even more disturbing was the knowledge that the smell reminded her of a mortuary. It smelled like death, and who could forget about the temperature? Throughout the winter months, the temperature in certain rooms remained uncomfortably cold, even when the thermostat was set to the hottest temperature possible. It is safe to say that we've barely scratched the surface here because there is much more that happened to the Lutz family during their 28-day stay at the Amityville home. And it all culminated in a horrifying incident that forced the family to flee in the middle of the night. So, what exactly happened? Well, according to Kathy, she was awoken by her husband screaming at the top of his lungs. She got out of bed to check on him and found him kneeling beside their bed, staring straight ahead with a blank expression on his face. Startled, Kathy asked her husband what was wrong, but he didn't respond. Kathy then approached the closet and turned on the light. Suddenly, her husband jumped up from the bed and ran over to her in a panic, shouting, "Get out, get out." Together, the couple ran out of the bedroom and down the stairs. Kathy's eyes were fixed on her husband, concerned by his bizarre behavior. And what she saw next made her blood run cold. Her husband, who had a wild look in his eye, was shaking violently as he started screaming, 315, 315, 315. He kept repeating this phrase over and over again. And though Kathy was confused, one thing became clear. Her husband was having a psychotic episode. But before she could do anything, George fell to the ground in front of her and started convulsing. Kathy was terrified and immediately called for 911. She explained that her husband was seizing and foaming at the mouth. But before long, it became apparent that George wouldn't hurt her or their children. After calming down, George told his wife that he had to get out of the house. He packed a few things quickly, and then the two of them left the house, never to return. But what was so scary about the incident was that just a year earlier, the same thing had happened to the DeFeo family. According to news reports, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was also known to wake up at precisely 3:15 a.m., the exact same time that George woke up. Furthermore, after the Lutzes left the house, no one else was able to live there. Not one single person was willing to take the risk. That is until the story was picked up by the local news. Soon enough, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived at the scene. They had become famous for investigating cases of the paranormal and demonology, and they believed that the home was the source of all the commotion. Lorraine Warren even claimed to see the ghost of one of the murdered DeFeo children while visiting the home. The couple would later publish a book about their findings and even inspire an infamous 1979 film. The book and movie would go on to spark several sequels, but that's a topic for another video. So, what's the truth? Was the house really haunted, or was it all a publicity stunt? Well, there are arguments for both sides. Those who believe that the house was haunted cite several factors. First and foremost, the murders are a fact, and they say that kind of violence leaves a stain that can never be erased. Then there's the Lutz story. Too many witnesses experienced the same things for it to be fake, they say, but skeptics argue that the haunting was a hoax. Some believe the Lutz family exaggerated events to sell book and movie rights. And a recent investigation has revealed that parts of the story be entirely made up. For example, the slime may have actually been mustard that leaked from a nearby restaurant upstairs. The smell of death could have been attributed to a sewer line break, and the mysterious cold spots could have been caused by faulty insulation. But what do you think? Do you think that the Amityville horror is one of the greatest scams of all time, or was the Lutz family truly tormented by a haunting? Let us know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to stay tuned for more videos like these, and thanks for watching.